We are Group 31 for CE 222, and our topic is International Construction Industry in Europe. I'm Anna Gehrman, and I'm a junior in civil engineering.
I'm Trevor Rich, and I'm a junior in civil engineering.
I'm Molly Wagner, and I'm a junior in industrial management. So today we will be going into more detail on these general topics. We will first discuss how concepts for projects are determined. Then we will go into more detail on bid documents, contracts, safety and regulations, construction payments, completion, and then discuss our overall conclusions. Similar to the U.S., the European Union determines projects and their needs by considering the land and how the functional use of the project will affect its end users. Focus groups and surveys are often used to determine this need. In the U.S., architecture is often trans-historical and used for functionality. European architects often use more reflexive and symbolic designs. Engineers in the EU and Europe in general also deal with more restoration work and have more regulations due to the aging infrastructure. The two pictures on the right show a selection of reflexive designs in the EU versus the functional designs used in the US.
The differences between the United States and the EU are that the U.S. uses sealed bidding, where the proposals are competitive and negotiated. The EU has 4 different procedures that are practiced, including an open procedure, restricted procedure, a negotiated procedure, and a competitive dialogue procedure. In the United States, the common practice laws create protections for owners and bidder incentives. In the United States, each state has its own rules for how a construction contract works, while in Europe, every country that is part of the EU must follow specific rules for contracts. The general rule in the U.S. is that provision in a contract is void if it requires litigation in laws of another state. Contracts in the EU are not allowed to discriminate against businesses registered in another country. This goes for any service that is used in the whole timeline of a construction project. Since the same contract rules apply to all countries that are part of the EU, contractors cannot refuse to accept documents and certifications that were issued in another EU country, as long as they have the same level of guarantee. In the U.S., government restrictions become complex when state borders are involved.
In terms of safety and regulation, the United States has OSHA that creates laws and regulates industry based on these laws, and they do this through fines. In the US, OSHA focuses on 3 strategies to enforce, assist, and partner with industry. In the EU, however, there is not an overarching organization that can regulate industry. Instead, each member nation in the EU regulates themselves.
Equipment in the EU is similar to the US, except for the fact that obviously again there's more restoration work to be done. For this reason, many projects require scaffolding and work platforms. Cranes and excavators are used similarly in the US or the EU as they are in the US, and are manufactured by similar brands such as Caterpillar and Volvo. It is important to note that the Construction Equipment Association governs legislation for most of Europe, and most countries have their own version of this association. On-site employees are represented by many EU and non-EU nations. It is more common to have foreign workers in Europe due to the geography and general location of all projects. For this reason, employees must be mobile and able to be moved around from job sites and even countries in some cases. Intensities of the job are similar to the U.S. meaning hard weather and hard working conditions. Attire is also similar to the U.S., which generally consists of hard hats, protective eyewear, boots, which in some cases would be steel toe, vest, and protective pants. Materials in Europe often consist of brick, clay, and concrete, as it was developed by the Romans and is present in many ancient buildings in Europe as well as newer buildings. Additionally, steel is a big component, but wood is not, and it is primarily used in the U.S. as well, or instead. There is a plan developed so that by 2020, contractors and engineers are given incentives to reach certain efficiency levels. This is to accomplish the worldwide goal of combating wastefulness in the expanding population and industries. Some of the incentives can be seen to the right.
Construction payments in the EU. While traditional bank loans are available, like in the US, they are harder to come by. This is due to recent financial crisis within the European Union, and also European construction companies tend to be smaller to medium-sized enterprises, as opposed to the US, where the industry is dominated by larger companies. As a result, many alternatives have been created for some aspects of construction. These include supply chain finance, project bank accounts, and the home building fund. Payment schedules in the EU. It is very similar to that in the US, and the information is laid out in the supplemental conditions of the contracts. Responsibility of valuation of work lies with the contractor and is checked by the architect and or engineer prior to payment from the owner, and the time period is laid out in the contractual agreement.
The U.S. has specific rules that people must comply with in order to have their buildings inspected. These rules make it easier for the inspector to see if the building is complete or not. In about half of the EU countries, a final site inspection conducted by the building authorities and other authorities is required. In the other half, the building authorities rely on declarations by a private body that has conducted the building work or the site inspections, and they do not perform a final site inspection.
In conclusion, the US and the EU are very similar in their construction industries. However, there are some key differences. These include the regulations that they have to adhere to. The conception of projects are different just based on the needs. The bid process is very similar, and the financing is different due to the previously listed reasons.